Yeah, that would be
Here,
great.
yeah. I don't see you.
Right behind
Hi.
So we have wiggle room with the time, like it's 11. What's the
I got you down, Church Street Cafe. We're gonna be there.
Yep,
I think it's 90 minutes or is it just starting at 1:30?
to show you how kind and generous I am, I'll even let you buy it.
Wow.
That is awesome. Fantastic.
So it's black coffee, right? Oh, yeah.
People from Ohio. He's between.
Oh, yeah. Which,
I'm not used to this.
I don't know why they haven't already banned.
Yeah, I know. Like, we came to the right place and that was everything. Folks in the audience.
That's something that the federal government
Yeah, well, you know.
just ban the use of dial machines for
But they can't after all the money Diebold's given all them, that's what elected Congress.
Sure, we're ready to go.
Please.
I'd like to get this started. First, I want to say thank you for everybody giving up watching the Bears game to be here. Or enjoying the great weather we have out there for a Sunday.
Which is lovely.
It is.
I think like all of us, you're interested in making sure our elections are secure and our results are accurate. And Larry Quick here will be our presenter today. He'll give us an overview of the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project to the group at the state level and the bills we got going and how we can help them get these bills passed so we can have them in play by 2020. We want to make sure that election is secure and accurate and safe. So without much further, I'm going to let Larry get started.
Okay, thank you, Jerome. I'm wonderfully surprised to see all the folks that have foregone the Bear game. And I'd like to thank Drew and his team for setting up this room with the mic, the IT, and then getting the videos all set up, and the refreshment table was just awesome. If I had known there would be refreshments, I would have gotten here 15 minutes sooner. But there may be an opportunity later in the session. Just to give you a little bit of background about me and the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project, I ran for office in 2002, and shortly thereafter, I started to go online and I started reading some articles by Tom Hartman. Is anyone familiar with Tom? Okay. Okay, and then Bev Harris, the founder of Black Box Voting. Okay, and my background, I have a bachelor's degree in accounting from DePaul, and when I graduated, I started on the audit staff of Pete Marwick Mitchell in downtown Chicago in their savings and loan group. So I spent about 2 years of my professional life as an auditor with different CPA firms, and then I went back to graduate school at Northwestern, and then as an instructor, I taught auditing at Benedictine University, Aurora University, and Kendall College. And so, I have a background both in practice and in theory. And so something really hit me odd as I was listening to the returns in 2002 when it was election night and I was having a little party up in Geneva, and I started to hear that the people of Minnesota did not elect Walter Mondale as their senator. And he had like about a 7 percentage point lead going into that election. And something just kind of hit me in my gut that there might have been something wrong with that outcome. At that time, I didn't realize what probably happened until I started to read articles by Hartman and Bev Harris and others. Okay, so in terms of the Ballot Integrity Project, a group of concerned citizens started meeting in 2003 down on the near north side of Chicago with Ed Sathers, and then, I don't know, within a few months we created the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project to be a nonpartisan, nonprofit election integrity organization having as its goal and mission the safe, accurate, and transparent elections throughout the state of Illinois. So I have been working with Melissa Erda, who is our state co-chair, and Claire Tobin, also our state co-chair, going back to 2004. And it has been a long and difficult slog, because think about this. What are some really serious issues or problems that humanity is facing, that our country is facing, where the forces are invisible? That we're experiencing consequences of forces that are invisible. Maybe some thoughts, some serious issues that we're facing as a species. Well, what about the climate change, right? Al Gore has been back in the 70s, right? Did anyone see An Inconvenient Truth? I think he won an Academy Award for that documentary, and I had no idea that Gore was so concerned about this issue. And so since the 70s, he was trying to raise consciousness and awareness that we've got a serious problem developing facing humanity with the buildup of the carbon gases, but we can't see that buildup. Now, we can see a dirty smokestack, right? And we can see, in the winter, we can see exhaust coming out of our vehicles, but by and large, when it comes to the buildup of fossil fuels, it's invisible, okay? Now, who is Edward Snowden?
Good guy.
Okay. Did anyone see Glenn Greenwald's and Laura Poitras' Citizen 4, I think it was? It was a documentary about Snowden when he was in Hong Kong. I mean, they were actually shooting it before he left. But what is and was Edward Snowden's major concern for the welfare of this nation? Invisible mass surveillance, right? Our cell phones, our emails, we have GPS systems, we go down the tollway, we have iPasses, and so basically, I was reading Greenwald's book, Nowhere to Hide, and where we're sitting right now in 2018 is in a society where we have surveillance cameras at the intersections. Okay, I mean, our privacy is virtually disappeared according to Greenwald. But can we see that process in action?
No.
I mean, we can see cameras, right? We don't know what happens to the data that's fed into those cameras, right? I get on my cell phone, I don't know what's happening, and I've heard that your cell phone, and I don't know if this is true, is never really off. You can turn it off and the light goes off, but someone can actively, remotely activate it so they can turn the mic on and they can listen to what you're saying. Okay, now I've heard more than one person talk about that. Now, what about microwave? What about 5G?
Oh, yeah.
Who's heard about 5G?
Don't worry, it won't happen in McHenry County for a long
Right now, our internet is what G? 4G, right? Okay.
It's silly.
Yeah, right. So, right. At least when I turn on my phone, it says 4G. I'm operating. Okay. Now, when it comes to microwave radiation and Wi-Fi waves, can we see them? But are there health professionals that are warning us about the possible adverse effects from microwave and Wi-Fi radiation? Absolutely. So we have climate change, which we can't see. We have mass surveillance, which we can't see. We have microwave radiation, which we can't see. And so if we can't see it, is it really a problem? Now, how are human beings in recognizing problems where they can't see the dynamics physically happening? Okay, now, what about the possibility of malware being installed in computers, computer voting systems, and then the votes are recorded and tabulated in the dark of cyberspace? Okay, anytime you look at a computer or a machine tabulating numbers, human beings can't see what's going on. Okay, so I'd like to open up our presentation with a short video lab demonstration conducted by some computer scientists, PhDs from Princeton University. This is commonly known as the Princeton hat, and they're going to show you how, in a matter of a couple of minutes, you can read computer voting machines, and then the perpetrators can erase their trail and not be caught. So, Mike, if you'd fire that up, please.
This is a Diebold AccuVote TS electronic voting machine of the type used in elections in several U.S. states. We studied this machine in our laboratory at Princeton University to evaluate its security and its suitability for conducting elections. The detailed results of our study, including a full technical paper, are available at itpolicy.princeton.edu/voting. The behavior of voting machines is controlled by computer software. The software that tallies votes on this machine was written by Diebold. Our study shows that a criminal who can inject malicious software into this voting machine can control how the votes are tallied. His malicious software can steal votes, and it can cover its tracks so that the theft cannot be detected. To illustrate this danger, we have created in our laboratory a demonstration software program that steals votes. This video will show our demonstration software in operation. We will also show how a criminal can inject malicious software into a voting machine, and how he can create a computer virus that spreads itself between voting machines, injecting malicious software on every machine it infects. We will now show how to steal votes in a simulated election. On the morning of Election Day, the voting machine awaits instructions. The machine appears to be functioning normally, but unbeknownst to any observer, it contains malicious software that will steal votes. The machine greets the election workers normally. At this point, the election worker can perform so-called logic and accuracy tests that are supposed to determine whether the machine is functioning correctly. Logic and accuracy testing is essentially a pretend election. The worker casts pretend ballots, and then the machine counts the pretend votes. The election worker makes sure that the pretend count is correct. Our vote-stealing software can tell that the worker is doing logic and accuracy testing, so this is not a real election. It allows the pretend votes to be counted correctly, so that the machine passes the test. Everything still looks normal. Now the election worker tells the machine to start the election. The machine prints out a paper tape showing that no votes have been recorded yet. The election has begun. The first voter approaches the machine to cast his vote. The election workers have given him a voter card, which will allow him to cast one vote. He inserts the voter card into the machine, and the machine presents him with a ballot. In this example election, there are two candidates for president, George Washington and Benedict Arnold. The voter chooses George Washington. The machine asks him to confirm his vote, and he does so. The machine ejects the voter card after marking it as used. That's one vote for George Washington. 4 more voters cast their votes. They vote for George Washington, Benedict Arnold, George Washington, and George Washington. The correct result for this election is George Washington, 4 votes, Benedict Arnold, 1 vote. Election day is now over. An election worker approaches the machine, inserts a supervisor card, and tells the machine to end the election. The machine prints out a paper tape announcing the results. The tape shows that Benedict Arnold won the election, 3 votes to 2. This result is incorrect. Malicious software stole votes from George Washington and gave them to Benedict Arnold. The voting machine recorded the election results on its internal memory and on a removable memory card. A poll worker opens the side of the machine and removes the memory card. The memory card, when examined by technicians, also shows that Benedict Arnold won the election, 3 votes to 2. Every record kept by the voting machine shows the same fraudulent result: Arnold 3, Washington 2. How did this happen? The voting machine was running Diebold's election software, but it was also silently running our demonstration vote stealing software. And our software was able to steal votes without being detected. When the election ends, the vote-stealing software can delete itself from the voting machine. No evidence remains that the machine was ever hijacked. No evidence remains that any votes were stolen. As far as anyone can tell, the election was conducted fairly. But the result is fraudulent. This vote-stealing attack requires injecting malicious software into the voting machine. Anyone who has access to a voting machine for a few minutes can install malicious code. Here is one way to do so. In advance, we prepare a memory card containing our malicious software. When we get a few minutes alone with the machine, we first open the side door. We can do this with a key. There are thousands of keys in circulation, and any hardware store will copy them. Even without a key, the lock is easily picked. One member of our team can consistently pick the lock in less than 10 seconds. Or we can simply remove a few screws and lift off the machine's cover. Next, we remove any memory card that is already in the machine and insert our prepared memory card. We press the power button to boot the machine. When the machine boots, it will automatically install our malicious software for us. The machine makes a musical noise when it boots, but we can suppress this noise by inserting headphones into the machine. We remove our memory card, replace any card that was there before, and close the door. Our malicious code is now installed on the machine. The total elapsed time is less than 1 minute. Due to design flaws in the Diebold AccuVote TS voting machine, it is possible to construct a computer virus that infects these machines and spreads automatically from one machine to many others. To illustrate this, we have constructed a demonstration virus in our lab. The machines use removable memory cards to distribute software updates and store the results of elections. The memory cards function similarly to floppy disks or thumb drives on ordinary PCs. Memory cards act as carriers for the virus. When a memory card is inserted into an infected machine, the machine copies the virus onto that memory card. If the memory card is removed and later put into another machine, the virus spreads from the memory card to the new machine. In this way, the virus can spread from one infected machine to an entire population of machines. The virus can carry with it a malicious payload program that is installed on every infected machine. For example, our demonstration virus carries our vote-stealing software, so that every machine that catches the virus will steal votes. A criminal could use this kind of virus to install malicious software on many voting machines, even if he has access to only a few machines, or even only one. By planting a virus far enough in advance, he can ensure that a significant number of machines will steal votes on election day. These problems, taken together, pose a very serious threat to the security of the elections conducted on Diebold AccuVote TS voting machines. We urge public officials to address these issues promptly. More details, including a full technical paper containing a more complete security analysis and a discussion of mitigation strategies, can be found on our website at itpolicy.princeton.edu/voting.
Okay, thank you. Now, is there anyone here who's seen this video before?
I've seen something similar. It's called Hacking Democracy, and it's a documentary available on Netflix. It was put together by some people in Ohio.
Okay,
I've seen this one, and I've seen the one for the replacement of that, which is the TSX,
okay,
which is even easier.
okay. Yeah, there's an outstanding organization called verifiedvoting.org, and it's made up of computer science experts, PhDs, and they have studied and analyzed and evaluated all of the computerized voting systems that are used in the United States, okay? And they will, then they will identify where the security weaknesses are. Like some of the voting machines have infrared ports, and so that you can reprogram the machines from a remote location. Now, to my knowledge, none of the computerized election systems that are being used in the United States that have been used, since 2000, 2002, have ever passed U.S. government minimum information technology security standards, okay? These machines are incredibly, according to all the computer scientists that have examined them, that have worked with them, that have hacked into them, they're all vulnerable to malicious hacking, okay? So these are the expert computer scientists making this statement and assessment. So, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna, since my mic is live, so it should pick up my vote. So my presentation today, and it's a short one, is called The Current State of Illinois and U.S. Election System Integrity. Now here's a question. Where are we with the current state of election system integrity in Illinois? Where are we with the current state of election system integrity in our other 49 states? Another question. Who here feels highly confident in the accuracy and security of Illinois elections? I mean, this is where we need to be honest and open, and I'm sure there are many people, citizen voters, who have a high degree of confidence in the accuracy and the integrity of Illinois elections. Is there anyone here in that group?
It depends on the county, mostly because the equipment changes from county to county.
It does. Now, in Kane County, we use the Hart InterCivic E-Slate DRE dial machine. Up until this last election, I was in the city. I live in the city of Aurora, and we had the Aurora Election Commission, and they used we created OptiScan ballot cards, which were fed into a Diebold OptiScan tabulator, but also to meet the disability requirements, we had one of these Diebold touchscreen machines. Okay, yes, sir.
Well, I'm an election judge, and we just recently changed equipment. We now have, besides paper ballots, which we still have in Illinois, that's mandated. We replaced our TSX machine with an AccuVote touchscreen. I don't know exactly what you call it, but what it does is it produces a paper ballot from what you type on the screen, so you can compare that ballot against what you voted on the screen, or to what you thought you.
And then is the ballot fed into a tabulator?
That ballot is then counted in the AccuVote scanner.
Yeah.
Kept this paper ballot.
Yeah.
Also, that scanner produces a PDF image of the ballot.
Okay.
Which is stored with the.
And if those
with the
images
electronic.
aren't tampered with or hacked, that's important. Okay. My understanding is that it is possible to manipulate the ballot images. Yes, ma'am.
Also, while I feel marginally more comfortable that everything goes into the Optus scanner
Yeah.
as a paper ballot, the documentary that I found on Netflix was actually hacking the Optus scanner.
Right.
So that you can have all the ballots, and very few people are going to be able to count every single ballot by hand in a
Right.
large election.
There are a number of situations that I can share with you. Starting in 2000 in Volusia County, who was running for president in 2000?
George Bush.
And Al Gore. And was that a close election?
That's
Okay.
second.
Now, initially, the media, the networks called the state of Florida for which candidate?
Al Gore.
Al Gore, okay? Now, what happened is that Diebold internal emails that somehow got outside the organization indicated that in Volusia County, a memory card was substituted into an OptiScan tabulator, right? So when in Aurora, I would fill out my own paper ballot, and then I would walk up to the OptiScan tabulator, which is run by computer software, and I would feed my ballot into the machine, and then at 7 o'clock, the judges would order the machine to print out a poll tape, and so the vote totals for each candidate in that precinct then would be printed out on a poll tape. And I always was I've been a closing poll watcher because I wanted to see how the votes came out in my precinct. So they would print out one poll tape for the OptiScanner and another one for the DRE touchscreen. So then I would add those two together. Now, a memory card, as you saw on the video, is about the size, right, of a credit card. And so what the Diebold personnel concluded is that in Volusia County, a memory card, an unauthorized memory card, was substituted into the OptiScan tabulator, and it subtracted 16,022 votes from Al Gore's total. Okay, now when that happened, that caused Al Gore's statewide total to drop, okay? And at that point, apparently Bush had a cousin who was working at Fox Media, and when that happened, it looked as though Bush had won, the state of Florida. So then what did Fox Media do as a result of that event? They called the election for Bush. And then what did ABC do? Call the election, and NBC and CBS. But then when we woke up the next morning, we discovered indeed the vote was so close that there was a mandated state recount. So you couldn't call the election for any candidate because the vote totals were so close that it was subject to a statewide mandated recount. Okay, but what happened in the minds of the voters? Who won that? Who won Florida? Because it came out on TV, right? And if you challenge that, you're a what? A sore loser, right? You're a sore. Okay, and so indeed, then there's Kevin Spacey was in an HBO movie about the whole Bush versus Gore and the recount, and there's been a lot that's been written. But this is what you can do. Now, eventually, those 16,022 votes were added back to Al Gore's total in Volusia County. But for that short period of time, by subtracting those votes, made it look as though Gore was going to lose Florida, and so then Fox Network called the Florida for Bush, and that was the tipping state, right? In the end, what was the final official vote margin for Bush in the state of Florida? 532 votes, right? The Supreme Court ordered the stopping of the recount, and at that point, Bush was up by 532 votes, and Catherine Harris, Secretary of State, who was on a Bush campaign, said, "This is it. Bush has won the state of Florida, and the rest is history." Okay, so that's what can happen with the OptiScan counters. Okay, and that wasn't even a touchscreen. Now, so if you do feel highly confident in the accuracy and security of Illinois elections, I would ask you to ask yourself, what's your justification for feeling so confident? Now, I would like to now share what I, as an audit professional, and others have discovered about the current state of Illinois and U.S. election system integrity. Okay, we have discovered over the years a critical lack of external independent review throughout the election system. A critical lack of external independent review. We have found highly insecure storage of ballots, computer memory cards, election machines, and key election documents. Oftentimes, these computer voting machines are sitting out in the hallway in a school or a church for a couple of days before the election, allowing those guys with the malware to come in and do their thing. We have discovered serious chain of custody weaknesses involving ballots, voting machines, computer memory cards, and other key election documents. We have discovered that election recount systems are expensive, they're slow, they're insecure, and often inaccurate, okay? So rather than trying to achieve quality through inspection after the fact, what I'm going to argue is we need to design quality into the system so that the system is going to generate reliable election results. Now, we've also discovered that many election systems are controlled by partisan elected officials. Okay, so that the person who has control of the voting mechanism in a county is often a partisan elected official. That doesn't mean that they're unethical or that they're not doing a good job, but they ran as a candidate for a particular party, and then when their election comes up, they're in control of the election system that's counting the votes in their race. Now, we have also discovered until who is our current president these days? Donald Trump. Now, what did candidate Trump say in 2016 prior to the November election?
Rigged.
He said the November election is going to be rigged, and the question is, was he right? So we're going to address that question, okay? But after that, all of a sudden, we had been, trying for years to get mainstream media to take a serious look at the evidence, the security issues, the vulnerability of our election systems with no success, okay? Keith Olbermann, I just read it in John Simon's book, after the 2004 election, started to do a number of shows about what was going on in Ohio, okay? Because in Ohio, the exit polls showed that Kerry was winning by about 4 or 5%. And then the Secretary of State servers, Ken Blackwell, who was co-chair of the Bush Election Committee in Ohio and Secretary of State, his servers crashed. And those votes from the Secretary of State servers were sent into Tennessee to Smart Tech Corporation. They had a mirror servers, and 45 minutes later, those votes were sent back to the Secretary of State servers, and when they turned up, the vote was flipped. All of a sudden, Bush was in the lead by 4 or 5%, and Kerry was second, and that's the way it stayed for the rest of the evening. Okay, so all right. So what happened to Olbermann? He started investigating this, and after a few shows, he ended up taking a forced 2-week vacation, an unannounced forced 2-week vacation. So they got him off of the air for 2 weeks, and then he never spoke about it again when he came back to his desk. Okay, we've discovered apathetic political parties, failing to point out election system irregularities and security weaknesses to the media and the public. Now, I have here the 2016 presidential primaries were very interesting. We actually got exit poll data right when the polls closed. The media put up the projections, and those are basically the raw exit polls. Now, the interesting thing happened. Well, we had the same states having primaries, Republican primary, Democratic primary. We had the same exit polling organizations, doing the exit polls. And amazingly, the Republican presidential primary, all of the reported actual results all fell within the sampling margin of errors of the exit polls. So basically, with the exception of Texas, And who was running as president from the state of Texas? Ted Cruz, okay. With the exception of Texas and one other state, it looked as if the Republican presidential primary was indeed a clean primary in these 15 or 20 states where they did the exit polls. Now, in the Democratic primary, and I have the table with the exit poll and the actual and the official vote percentages. Hillary Clinton was given state after state after state with vote flipping, where she was doing far better than the exit polls predicted that she would do. And finally, things got so embarrassing for the exit polling company that they stopped doing exit polls in the Illinois primary, they stopped doing exit polls in the California primary, and electionjustice.usa.org did an analysis of the Democratic primary, and they concluded that Bernie, based upon what the exit polls predicted, was deprived of about 200 earned delegates, okay? Now, he went into Philadelphia with about a 200 earned delegate lead. So Bernie would have, if we didn't have this vote flipping in the Democratic presidential primary, and we're not accusing Hillary Clinton or any of her staff of being behind this. My personal opinion is the people behind this didn't want Bernie Sanders anywhere near the Democratic nomination, and they certainly didn't want him anywhere near the White House. Okay, that's my personal take on why that happened. So now in the end, if the primaries had been allowed to be tabulated honestly, I think probably Senator Clinton would have won, because Bernie wasn't a longtime Democrat. He had all these super Democrats that Hillary had known for years, and so in the end, I think she would have gotten the nomination. But they sure angered a lot of Sanders supporters, because they really thought that their candidate really got a dirty deal, not only from the election flipping, but from other things. So now, so we've had so did Hillary Clinton step up and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong? There are 4, 5, 6, 7 states where the exit poll is predicting that Sanders is winning and I'm losing, but yet that was flipped around? No, she didn't do that. Okay. Same thing happened in the 2008 presidential primary when Obama had won in the caucus in Iowa. So then we roll into New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is an interesting state because most of the precincts have hand-counted paper ballots, but the large cities use Diebold OptiScan counters. And what happened is that, and even Chris Matthews made a comment about this, all the tracking polls indicated that Obama had clearly won the Democratic primary in the state of New Hampshire in 2008. Okay, but when the OptiScan machine started reporting their totals, it was flipped, and Clinton was given the victory in New Hampshire. Now, could that have changed the whole dynamics of the primary? Because if Obama had been given his victory in New Hampshire coming off of the Ohio caucus, so it appeared that whoever did the flipping wanted the primary to continue for whatever reason. That's my take on it. Okay, so we've had victims on both parties not coming forward and crying foul. And finally, we've discovered computerized election systems that are produced, programmed, and maintained by corporations with strong ties to one particular political party. Okay, if you look at the ownership and the operations of Diebold, Hart, East Slade, Sequoia, okay, strong ties to one particular political party. Now, what can we as citizen voters do to assure that Illinois election results are accurate and secure? Okay, so I'm here to bring you some good news. Now, here's another question. Can we in Illinois serve as an election integrity model for the other 49 states? I'm going to say yes, we can. Now, I would like to share with you 2 critical keys that are necessary to have accurate and secure elections. The first key is a reliable audit trail from the final election report all the way back to voter ballots, okay? We need a reliable audit trail from the election reports generated by the computers all the way back to the ballots. Now, the second key is a robust audit of official election results. So we need a reliable audit trail, and then we need a robust audit working that audit trail. Now, without a reliable audit trail and without robust audits, voters, candidates, and election authorities do not have a reasonable basis for confidence in the accuracy and integrity of reported election results. And this is my considered opinion as an audit professional, okay? Without a reliable audit trail and without robust audits, why should we have confidence that the printed financial statements or the printed election results are accurate, right? Have people ever been involved in falsifying financial statements? Overstating revenues, understating expenses, understating liabilities. Now, without a reliable audit trail and robust election audits, all we have is what we call faith-based voting. All we have ever had since the introduction of computerized voting is faith-based voting. Now, at this point, I would do well to explain a couple of terms. What, pray tell, is an audit trail? An audit trail is an unbroken chain of hard copy documentation that supports the accuracy and the integrity of a quantitative report. An audit trail is an unbroken chain of hard copy documentation that supports the accuracy and integrity of a quantitative report. Now, in financial accounting, which I happen to teach, the audit trail starts with the financial statements, the income statement, the balance sheet, statement of cash flows, and works its way back through the trial balance, back to the general ledger, back to the journals, and ultimately the source documents. Now, in election systems, a sound audit trail starts with the final election reports, right? Who won all of the races in the district, and works its way back to tabulation spreadsheets, back to precinct poll tapes, and ultimately back to the paper ballots created by voters. Now, an audit is a review. When you hear the term audit, think review. An audit is a review of documentation. It's a review of information flow and a recalculation of reported quantitative totals. In the absence of sound paper audit trails and robust audits, all we are left with is faith-based election results. Now, later this afternoon, we'll review and discuss the Illinois Election Integrity Act, which requires 3 mandatory election audits, 2 of which must be performed by licensed, independent, certified public accountants. Now, the Illinois Election Integrity Act provides us with a single solution to a complex election system problem. So at this point, I'd like to open up for comments, questions, concerns, whatever. I'm going to sit down for a second while we do this. Any comments, questions? Yes, sir.
In the floor,
I think maybe we had 200, so it would stamp the ballots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 200. Okay, then we would throw a dice, and let's say we came up with number 7. Then we would count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'd pull out ballot 7. We'd pull out ballot 17. We would pull out ballot 27, 37, and so on. And then what we would do is we had a tabulation sheet. I was a observer poll watcher, and then 2, 3 other people were the official counting. So they would, one person would look at the race and they'd call off who the vote went for. The other person would mark it down. There would be an observer to make sure that they're calling off the proper name and it's landing. And so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so let's say after 20 ballots, then we'd stop and they'd say, okay, this is what we have on our sample count for the races. And then the poll watchers would have their own independent tally sheet. Oh yeah, I agree. Okay, at this point, candidate A, B, C, and D all have, and then we go on. Now, if there's a disagreement, they're going to have, in a particular race, they're going to have to go back and recount those 20 ballots to see where the mistake occurred. So after that, that's going to take about an hour to an hour and a half. Then the sample report is going to be prepared. A copy is posted on the wall that can be photographed or copied. And then in Kane County, which is where I live, we have 291 precincts. So in all of those 291 precincts, this is going on. So there are going to be 291 sample count sheets, and they're going to all be aggregated by the auditors and by the election officials, so that we can tell countywide what percent the Democratic sheriff candidate should get when the votes are all counted, and based upon the total number of votes cast, what that individual's vote total should be, the Republican candidate, the Green candidate. So what you do is you have a super scientific exit poll, and if you do, and more than 150,000 or more ballots are cast, you can have a 1% margin of error and a 99% confidence level. So you'll know right away whether there's unintentional error or fraud that's occurred in a particular race. Yes, ma'am.
My background's in statistics. That would probably work out, and I don't have the math in front of me to tell you, that will work out reasonably well for the two major parties. For third party, you're going to have a wider variation.
A lower confidence level?
Correct.
Yeah. So what happens is that as the number of ballots cast goes down, if you want to maintain a 1% margin of error, your confidence level is going to drop from 99% to 95% to 90% to 85. You know, if you want to hold the margin of error constant. So yeah, it's not perfect, but the thing is that it will. In Germany, they use exit polls because they do hand-counted paper ballots for their races, and these ballots take a week or two to count. The civil servants and others are counting, and so the voters, they want to know, well, who won on election night. So they have these unbiased scientific exit polls, and they can come within a few tenths of a percentage point for many of these races. They're that good.
We also have the interesting wrinkle here in the United States of both mail-in and early voting.
Yes.
And those are the wild cards. Like in McHenry County, we urged people to use mail-in because it would create more voter participation. You know, if we had a lousy day and all the senior citizens looked outside and said, nah, I'm not going, it would affect the vote total.
Absolutely. So the most secure form of voting is to have the voters come into the precinct on election day, fill out a hand-counted paper ballot. There's nothing wrong with using Optus scanners, because really, as long as they're not misprogrammed, they're more accurate typically than counting than human beings. But we need the human beings to verify the accuracy of the machine counters. Is really it.
So we won't, you know, if we have a large proportion of early vote or mail-in.
There's a chain of custody issue. Yes, there is so they have to address that. But like with the early votes, you see, if we could assure that the ballots are truly in a secure location, okay, then those can be tabulated after 7 o'clock on election night. So that's why I favor early voting on the OptiScan cards rather than the DRE touchscreens. Yes? Yeah.
Well,
Sure. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
there's different types of subjects that I wanted to know if you're going to touch on this afternoon. One of them is gerrymandering of voting equipment, machines, registration rolls, and other trick type things that can be done. Let's use the word analog, not necessarily digitally. Once we've got the voter into the booth, and they've either used their stylus, their pen, or their touch screen, but let's get them in there. Late opening or non-opening equipment that isn't ready to use when the polls are supposed to be. It's so blatant. I have to think this is happening in Illinois. I remember a neighbor who's been voting for many, many years walking into a local election, and they didn't have his
name on the list of registrants. Yeah, so one of the things that's been happening as the voter registration rolls have been put more and more on computers, it's easier to purge lots of voters with a few keystrokes, okay? If they were all in binders on pieces of paper, you'd have to go through and tear out the voters from the voter register. So this is called stripping the votes. And there studies have been done by Greg Palast and others where hundreds of thousands and millions of legitimate registered voters have been illegally stripped in states around the country. I don't know how bad it is in Illinois, but it's been bad in many other states, such as Yeah, and I've got some statistics. One was Arizona, and another I can pull that out. But so no, the Election Integrity Act.
I've personally seen it. I guess it's been more than once.
And the thing is that think about our election system. Are all the people involved in managing our election system professionals?
No, we just.
Do we have a high volunteer component of poll workers?
Yeah.
Okay, people who might do this once every other year or once a year, and so we're going to have operational process issues that occur that aren't involving intentional fraud, okay, but due to inadequately designed and staffed systems. Now, one of the audits that the Election Integrity Act we require is an operational audit done by the CPAs, where prior to the election, they're going to go into the election authority's office and they're going to look at their processes, their documents, the flow of information, the security of sensitive materials and equipment, the hackability of the machines that they're using, and they'll identify these deficiencies. They'll also suggest remedies for these deficiencies, and they will be put in a public report that's going to be given to the election authority to help improve the accuracy and the efficiency of their election system, and also to notify the public that we have these issues that threaten the accuracy of our elections. So that's one of the audits done by the CPAs. Now, I'm noticing it's 228, and would this be, yes, sir?
I just wanted to bring up the concept of utilizing, instead of closed source software, open source software, so that any vulnerabilities can be checked by the public as a whole, as well as it allow you to go into the system and check with something like an MD5 hash if that code has been altered whatsoever right before you open up the polls.
Right, that's far better than what we have now. See, the software that drives these touchscreen machines and the tabulary are proprietary. With the exception of the state of Oklahoma, where state employees actually program their voting equipment, the people who write the software that runs these programs, they claim this is proprietary. Even no one's allowed to examine their software. Even the election authorities, who are their customers, they sign contracts, and they're not allowed to examine the ballot cards. They're not allowed to do this exam, that exam. John Simon identifies this in his book Code Red. So this is certainly an important improvement, but we still need to have human beings hand counting a certain percentage, statistically valid percentage of the ballots. Otherwise, software can be changed, right? You can have open, but at the last minute. Right now, we have with the way votes are transmitted from the counties down to Springfield. If you can mimic the IP addresses, you can get votes sent from, let's say, LaSalle County. It'll go to your server. You can manipulate those votes. You can flip the votes, and then you send them down to Springfield. That's called the man-in-the-middle attack. And Stephen Spoonemore, who we're going to see in the second half, he has a whole video on how that's done. So you can have real-time calibration of votes that are being transmitted over telecommunication lines, and no one's going to know, because it just flips the votes and it's undetected. We should probably, yes, sir?
I was just going to ask, how did they detect the 16,000 missing?
Because it came from Diebold. Personnel discovered that this unauthorized, because there was something. See, one of the things that Stephen Spoonemore talks about is these voting machines should not accept a negative field of numbers. There's no reason why any of these touchscreen machines or OptiScan tabulators should accept a negative number. Yet these machines are programmed to accept negative numbers. So the Diebold people discovered it. They communicated in emails. Those emails got into the hands of Bev Harris, and so it was the Diebold people who discovered what happened. But yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering. Okay, so there's like the Diebold or
Diebold.
Yeah. Okay, so there's these. I mean, has there ever been anything noticed? I'm out in Kane County, so has there anything been noticed there, or up here in McHenry? Or,
Noticed?
Yeah, like with
Well, the thing is that the way these systems are set up, and since the equipment's proprietary and the software is proprietary, and the malware can self-erase itself unless you have a solid audit trail of hard copy documentation with robust audits. We have no idea what's happened to our elections. In the 2014 gubernatorial election, Quinn was ahead in the pre-election polls by about 3% in 3 different respected pre-election polls. His weighted, if you averaged them out, he had about a 3% lead going into the election. But when the computers got through tabulating the results, Rauner had a 3.5% margin. So there was a 7% swing from the pre-election polls to what the computers reported in Cook and DuPage and other counties. So now the exit poll showed that the 2 candidates, and I have the table, I can show you this table with these numbers, showed that the Rauner had about a 0.5% margin in the exit polls, the media exit polls, but yet when the night was over, there was a 3.5% shift in his favor. So to me, there was at least a 50% probability that Bruce Rauner did not win in 2014, and that indeed there was hacking. But since there were no audits that were conducted, we don't know. It's, what's it called? Faith-based voting. And on that, we should take a 10-minute break, huh? Get some refreshments, use the facilities, and we'll come back.
One last question on
Yes, sir.
Did people reveal that?
More. Now, he's being interviewed in 2006, but as John Simon points out, the discoveries and the insights that computer scientists have made in 2004 are just as relevant in 2018. So what Stephen is sharing is just as relevant today as it was when he was interviewed back in 2006. Let's wait until everyone gets their, this is a transcript, a partial transcript of his interview, because you're going to be hearing a lot of stuff, technical stuff, from a cybersecurity expert, and it's not easy to retain, if you're not an IT guy like Mike.
Whatever it was, I didn't do it, nobody saw me do it, you can't prove it.
Tell me
All right.
a little bit about what you do.
We functionally develop policy and secure architecture for IT systems, primarily for major international banking corporations, credit card companies, a number of government agencies.
So these companies hire you to what? Stop hackers?
One of the byproducts of what we're doing is we track data. We trace and track and create custodial management chains of how data moves through systems. Our largest amount of work is actually for the global credit card industries, in which we are generally tasked with finding how data moves between when you take a credit card and actually put it through a machine. The machine goes to an acquiring bank, which then has to integrate that information with their banking structure, hand it off to an international credit card company, who then hands it off to an issuing bank, who's the person who gave you a credit card. It can populate as many as 90 databases, all in a matter of 2 or 3 seconds, to approve your single transaction. We trace, set up the custodial management, and secure those types of transactions.
I see. So it's basically a chain of custody issues to make sure when
Correct.
the data is transported that
Correct.
it's secure.
Correct.
Okay. What is your experience with the architecture of electronic voting machines, specifically the Diebold machines?
My personal experience with them is purely as an outside observer asking to look at them. They refuse to show the architecture or allow it to be exposed to any kind of significant expert. The people who I have met, who they claim have certified their machines, have no knowledge of architecture whatsoever.
Now, who has asked you to look at the architecture?
No one has asked me to look at the architecture of a voting machine. I have repeatedly asked to look at the architecture of voting machines.
Why?
They will not allow us to do so. Because the fundamental structures that Diebold has used to set up their voting machines are inherently flawed. They're what I would consider IT junk.
Why do you say that? On what basis?
Because they do not allow the code any kind of validation or check that allows for a local auditor to confirm that it is in a configuration pattern appropriate for voting. So if you are going to set up, let's look at a Diebold ATM, which we work with a lot. If you're going to set up a Diebold ATM system at a bank, every line of code in that machine, which should be 30 to 35,000 lines of code, is inspected by 4 or 5 people, where each of the fields are confirmed that they're going to pass the information correctly to the machines that pass out the money, to the machines that take and validate your card, to the little motors that push your card back out to you, to the receipt printers, and to the integrated databases on the back end. No process inside of that is not followed with a 4 eyes operation, meaning 2 different people have to be looking at each step of the process at each step of the way. And those people are not from Diebold. One of them is from the installation group, and one of them is from the bank. Otherwise, the machine is not certified for use.
And this is not happening with respect to an electronic voting machine?
Not my knowledge.
So what you're saying is there's more security regarding the dispensing of a $20 bill, and the fact if you don't get that $20 bill, there is more of an audit system set up?
Of course.
Okay. Before we get into this, I just wanted to kind of do some background with the electronic voting machine. It emerged out of the 2000 election debacle.
Earlier than that.
But it was
Global Election Systems, a group out of Texas, was pushing these back in 1998. I first became aware of it and actually wrote a short letter encouraging people to not use these in 1999, before the 2000 election debacle. What happened in 2000 is, all of a sudden, you had a number of electronic systems fail during that election. The Volusia County incident, in which 16,000 votes suddenly vanished and then reappeared, and several uncertified cards somehow ended up in the system, also a Diebold system. That sort of got lost in the hanging Chad debate in Florida. However, there's a very strong argument to be made that the 2000 election was electronically stolen. The hanging Chads are just a distraction.
I see. Now, going back to the audit, I believe at many times you've asked the company, you've asked Diebold to audit their system.
I've sent personal letters to more than 20 executives at Diebold. I've sent dozens of letters to my own home county, my own home election board, which now uses Diebold machines. I've sent letters to Ken Blackwell and his office. I actually personally asked Ken Blackwell for this. I served as the co-chairman of the National Electronic Identity Task Force and presented the state's attorneys general the findings on how to secure state databases. At that meeting, Ken Blackwell was present, and I actually went up and asked him if we could have a conversation about that. He said it is not the appropriate venue. I then said to him, if you can't discuss voting machine security at a security conference meant for state functions, when can we have this discussion? He then walked away.
What about Diebold executives?
They have never responded. They responded, that's not fully true. I actually reached out to a number of their people in financial services because I have a very significant set of contacts through the banking work that we do, and the banking people that I'm working with asked for some of the Diebold people to speak to me. Since then, when they realize the scale of what I'm asking for, they have refused any further communication.
See, can you explain to the viewer how a Diebold voting machine can be hacked from a remote location? I know at times you've mentioned that foreign nationals can access.
Sure.
Take us
The Department of Homeland Security actually, and this is some of the people involved in issuing this, very good friends of mine from the U.S. CERT Center, which is the Cyber Emergency Response Team. The U.S. CERT Center actually put out a full warning, which I'm sure your station can get a copy of, warning that the way Diebold systems are architected, in the way the tabulators communicate to the central state tabulation center, is subject to foreign national hacking. They put out a warning about it. To the best of my knowledge, this is still the case. Here's how it happens. Each individual machine has significant problems. Most machines are not set up. The individual machine that you as a voter touch are not set up so that they themselves are electronically networked. A few of them are. Some of them hook up to phone lines for a variety of reasons. Some of them have IR port, infrared ports, the same way you scan information back and forth from a PDA. Inside of those machines are a number of layers of information, but eventually they get down to a memory card, which itself is subject to hacking. There's several subject to hackings in the operating systems, viruses, codes, screen flips, all those things can occur, but let's assume everything worked correctly in the machine, and you now have a card with the correct votes in the machine. Personally, we have no way to know this, but let's assume it's true. We then take those machines to the county elections headquarters. All those cards come in and one by one are inserted into a central tabulator. That tabulator is then supposed to take the total votes from each of the precincts and the total votes from the county and electronically transport them from that machine to a central state tabulation machine. Here's the problem. How is that moved from point A to point B? It's moved through common carriers. It'd be very easy if you understood the IP addresses, and this is something that anyone with basic electronic intercept skills understand. You can mimic an IP address, and in the process of that information being transferred to point A to point B, see it. Now, it may be PGP encrypted, it may be socket level encrypted, which Diebold claims to be the case. However, in the 3 counties where I have personally gone and asked the people who do the tabulation, they have no idea how to do encryption, what the encryption is, how it's set, or who sets it. So again, we're just trusting what Diebold says, oh, don't worry, it's encrypted. But none of the voting elections or officials know this or understand how it works. Okay, well then let in a professional who actually looks at encryption key algorithm systems, which I have for probably over 100 banks, let me see the system. I can tell you whether or not they're actually using a key exchange system which will make for a secure transmission or not. I tend to think they're not doing so.
So, again, you've said, forget the problems on the front end when a
Let's assume there are no problems.
Okay, right, and we won't even talk about Princeton at this point, but so as a voter, if I touch the screen, I'm assuming my vote is secure, but you're saying at that point, a lot can happen to your vote.
The chain of custody in terms of that vote, here's my finger, and if I were to write on a ballot, that ballot is now a permanent document. What is happening now is when you touch that screen has circuitry inside of it. And the circuitry inside of it talks to a data field. That data field below it is basically like you walking up and opening a curtain, there's a little man there. You say, hello, what's your vote? I said, well, I'd like to vote for this. He goes, okay, thank you. Then he closes the screen and goes to a different screen and tells someone else. That next layer is the operating system. Now, you don't really know what the screen is telling the operating system because you can't see it. So unlike a vote that you've marked, the screen now takes that information and passes it to a field set in the operating system. Who knows who wrote the operating system? Diebold won't tell us. I've personally reviewed a number of pieces of code from Diebold. It's garbage. Some of the code is awful. I reviewed the patch that they put in Georgia 2002 that many of them claimed is a clock function. It's not a clock function. It's a comparator function. It asked for 3 different fields on the front end. That's information coming down from the screen into the operating system, sits on the operating system in an entry platform. At that point, this piece of code asks 3 fields, I don't know what the 3 fields were, what their totals are, compares them against each other, and sends them somewhere else. Well, if it were me, and I were to guess what that code is, it's a vote flipping code. It's not a clock function. That I know.
You're referring to the
Georgia 2002 election.
Georgia.zip. There was some
Correct.
upgrade that was supposedly inserted
Well,
in the machine.
not the Rob, whether it's robgeorgia.zip, there's a number of names to the file. I've simply referred to it as what was called the 0-day patch. They patched it 2 days before the actual election itself between Cleveland and Chambliss. I have no idea why, what it was for, what fields it's asking for, or where it delivered them. But ostensibly, Bob Orosevich, the actual president, actually carried this himself, gave it to the people, and told them this is a clock function. None of them are programmers. They installed it like they were instructed, but it's not a clock function. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of comparator program.
Well, let's get back to some of the...
We didn't quite finish your question.
Right.
After you've moved through the system, all these different problems can occur, but finally it deposits a final set of data into a memory card. That card then has a number of chains of custody that anybody who's then carrying that card, where you're carrying a stack of paper ballots, sure, you could rewrite all the ballots, but that'd take you a long time. If you're carrying a memory card with every single vote from that day from a machine, you can change it like that. Somebody could have in their car or anywhere else, they could have a very simple kind of reader. This has been demonstrated in a number of different hacks. You can just change the information on that card by overriding it with the same operating system type that was used to record in the first place.
What about Al-Qaeda or China?
That's then the transmission component. Now let's say the cards have successfully gotten down to the county correctly. Who knows? No one's ever inspected the code inside this machine. So you're taking a card and you're saying, well, here's all the votes. And let's assume the correct card has been brought. Nobody's lost the card, which is what just happened in Maryland. They've actually gotten the card to the county, they put it in, and then it goes into a tabulator machine. Well, there's been repeated issues where people have said they've seen votes backing up in tabulators as cards are put in. Okay, well that would indicate that something inside of that program is not adding cards forward, it may be adding cards backward. I don't know, never seen the field sets. I do know in some of the optical scan machines and the cards where again I've gotten to look at the code, some of those cards are capable of taking a negative number. Now, as a programmer, this is a very interesting question. Generally, you try and make code as elegant, simple, and as clean as possible for security. There is no reason at all, if you have 0 votes, and then you add votes from that point going forward, maybe 10,000 votes is the maximum you could ever have on a machine, that makes sense. So a card should have a range of 0 to 10,000. There is no reason in the world a negative number should ever be able to exist on a voting card. And yet, in all the voting card code that I've looked at, Diebold has a negative field that allows a negative number to be entered in a vote total. Why? Why would you want to steal votes? That way you can start with a card that has negative 100 votes for somebody, then it takes them 100 votes before they even are back to 0.
And yet Diebold does not allow, for proprietary reasons, anyone to review the vote tabulation software.
They let us work on their cash machines, but no, they won't let anybody see their software.
Any thoughts as to why?
Because they're stealing elections.
How could you say that? And what are the vulnerabilities, or that you're just surmising?
I'm not surmising it. I have a very strong understanding of statistical analysis. The way we actually find credit card fraud, here's a horrible fact that people are not going to want to know. About 2.5% of all transactions on the global credit card network happening right as we sit here, and there are billions a day, are fraudulent. 2.5%. That's a statistic that we are constantly battling with. When a fraud group, when a group that is doing some particular credit card scam moves into an area and begins working to actively defraud cards, we see those statistics rise above the background level, and then we send in work, figure out who it is, and try and break out the gang. Statistical analysis of the movement of 1 or 2 percentage points is how all computer hacking is detected. If you look at the case of Saxby Chambliss, that's ridiculous. The man was not elected. He lost that election by 5 points. Max Cleland won. They flipped the votes. Clear as day. Everybody was shocked by it. There's been numerous vote flips at this point. I do not believe George Bush won. I believe Kerry won. And I'm a member of the GOP. But I want to make it clear. We need to live in a place where your election actually is reflected in the vote. I want my candidate to win. But if my candidate loses, I care a lot more about the process than I care about the victory.
So this is not a partisan issue?
It shouldn't be. This is a fascist issue. People who don't want voting and want fascist control but have people think they're voting. I mean, people forget the fact there was voting in Hitler's Germany. Guess what? He won with 90% of the vote all the time. There was voting in Saddam's Iraq, and guess what? Saddam won the vote all the time. Well, did they win? Was that actually the will of the voter? Was that the way the votes were even cast?
Maryland State Senate President Mike Miller called the card voting system, quote, the Diebold machines state of the art. Do you consider these machines state of the art?
State of the art what? State of the art for a voting machine? I guess so. As far as I'm concerned, what I have seen of voting machines is reasonably good 1994 technology.
Now, what do you suggest that the government should tell Diebold to do to make their machines less vulnerable?
You can't make voting machines less vulnerable. You can make voting machines transparent. All code needs to be inspected by external auditors. All process needs to be validated by the same way we do banking systems. Do credit card systems get defrauded? Yes, to the tune of 2.5%. 2.5% is a major amount if you're dealing with a vote. So let's look at credit card industry. I spend probably an average of 30 hours a week every single week of my life battling to try and keep the number of credit card frauds below 2.5%. We have a lot of money to do it. People really care about that. But that level of background fraud We can't get it below that point. It's just too hard. Well, let's look at the question of, do you want to have a system in place where there's a permanent background of electronic voting fraud at 2.5%? That means you have to win an election by a minimum of 3% to know that you won? I don't. Paper ballots, please. That's the only thing that can be secure. You can use electronic counters, and I appreciate Diebold wanted HAVA. They've got their $4 billion of giving away federal money. Great. You've stolen the money, throw the machines away, let's go back to paper.
Okay, let me just back up a second. Hacking. There's been a recent hack, much publicized. Princeton hacked the memory card, virus inserted.
They didn't hack the memory card, they hacked the operating
Or
system.
the operating system, but there have been other hacks to the memory card.
Harry Hurston.
Right. Diebold has come back every time and said, well, you know,
They're lying.
Can't happen.
They're lying. Diebold is lying.
What, their systems can't be hacked?
There is no system electronic in the world that cannot be hacked. I've spent my entire life building or hacking electronic systems. There are entire companies dedicated to ethical hacking, if you want to call it that. There is no system in the world, none, that cannot be hacked. If you give me the team of my choice of 8 people, and 1 week, I will get any piece of data you want in the world. End discussion.
Well, then how do you secure such a piece of equipment then?
You don't. You use paper ballots.
Video, the Wi-Fi strength down here.
Okay, this is good. This would be a good breaking point.
Okay.
I can't make it any clearer.
Okay, hang on, okay, let's
You
go.
cannot have secure electronic voting. It doesn't exist.
Well, what if there was transparency?
If there was transparency, you would be able to audit where a mistake had occurred and make decisions for what to throw away. But you wouldn't eliminate the effort to hack. The cleverness of bad guys is extraordinary. If you had complete transparency on the process, here's what would happen. People would eventually hack it and you'd have to throw away huge portions of things. If you want to use electronic systems to accelerate the process and make it more assured, there's no reason not to use optical scanning. You have a paper ballot, people mark it, you scan them very quickly into a system. Now, at that point, those need to have random sampling to compare the way the computer has actually recorded things versus some hand-chosen samples at random, 1 or 2%, and if 1 or 2% of random samples from the hand-counted paper ballots matches the computers, in all likelihood you do not have a hack, in all likelihood. So at that point, you have a very high degree of assurance that what you have is an accurate tabulation vote. Other than that, you don't.
So securing that that's
Correct. And having a validated paper trail. You must have paper ballots. Once you have a paper ballot, once you have generated, a hand-generated paper ballot is the best. It's cheapest, it's easy, it's foolproof, it's secure. The truth of the matter is that's still how a lot of things are done in the electronic world as well. Once you have generated that, you can validate how many ballots you have, who signed into a registry book, how the entire process has moved forward, and you can go back and audit and check if there's any kind of dispute. You then have accurate elections.
okay. Let's go back to the Princeton hack just
Mhm.
briefly. Shocking detail on how a virus can be inserted into a machine, and I don't want you to explain necessarily how it works, but just to comment on something that Diebold's response to this particular hack by Princeton computer scientists was that they used an old machine.
As far as I understand, that machine came off the assembly line 2 months ago. I'm sure the registry number is there, but let's stop and think about this. 2 graduate students in 3 hours successfully hacked the machine. And once they had completed writing their hack, they then added a 4-line code of self-erasing virus to allow it to propagate across the network. That's just 2 guys with 2 hours who had no interest or motivation in doing it other than the scientific interest. There are people out there, and there's a lot of them, who don't really want to win elections. What they want to do is they want to steal them. They have an enormous incentive for power, they have an enormous incentive for money, and they have enormous willingness to go and do it. I don't want to have a society where we're not sure who won. I want to live in a democracy where there's a valid capacity to audit the entire trail. The Princeton guys did a brilliant job. It was a simple and elegant organization, but stop and think about it. It doesn't matter, even if it was an older machine. Okay, great, so it was configured the way the 2004 machines were figured? Well, in that case, does that mean the 2004 election was hackable? Diebold is lying again.
But even so, some of those machines still are in operation in states across the country.
Correct.
See?
Still
The
in operation
2002
in
machines, which were used to steal the Chambliss election, they're still in use in Georgia, same machines.
This year, they're still in
How
operation.
much money does Diebold spend? Do you know offhand in ATM security around ATM versus their machines?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know.
Okay. What would you say to those who think that, I think I know the answer already, but that some people say that Diebold machines are either A, poorly designed or intentionally designed?
Oh, I think they're brilliantly designed. They're designed to steal elections. I mean, if you were to come to me, and people have, I mean, some of the things that we do are deliberate input audits. There are backdoors in the tabulation machines, which is what the US CERT warning is about. There's a backdoor communication that allows secondary computers to talk to the actual tabulators electronically from a distance. That's what US CERT warned about. There are layering and socket component problems. There is a negative field set up inside the tabulation.
What are these socket components?
Well, the socket, well, basically what it means is there are deliberately places built in the Diebold machines that allow you to insert data or make updates after the machine is running. A socket layer is supposed to, once you activate a socket session or a secure session, you're not supposed to be able to change an operating procedure or code. That's not true with Diebold machines. While the machine is running, if you have administrative override from the touchscreen layer, you can actually change the way the machine is operated. You can reprogram it. They sell it as a feature in case you need to make an update during the day.
But according to state law, any changes to the system, you have to recertify the equipment.
Well, if you change the software, of course, yeah. Of course.
Not the operating system.
If you change, well, according to which states, different states have different laws on this area. And I'm not an attorney, but I certainly know that since no one has ever seen what the code actually is, or no one credible has ever seen what the code is, there's really no way to know what's been changed.
Many people who are denying problems, they're saying, oh, well, these are just Democrats signaling alarms.
I'm a Republican. I worked on Giuliani's campaign, I worked on Bloomberg's campaign, I worked on John McCain's campaign. I've been a lifelong member of the party. This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is a democracy issue. If you actually care about a constitutional democracy in which each person votes, that vote is validated, and the people who end up in office are reflected on the basis of the way people voted, you care about this issue. If you don't want people to vote, if you don't want people's vote to count, and if you want to rule without owning it by a mandate, then you are very supportive of Diebold.
Well, Wally O'Dell has promised in an old fundraising letter to deliver.
I'm going to go ahead and accept.
Republican issue? I mean, who's stealing the votes? If what you say is true, who wants to steal the elections?
I certainly know that in old statistical information, it seems that in every single bizarre circumstance where exit data, polling data, or informational data swings, it has all been in favor of Republicans, but not the sort of Republicans who I want to see in office at all. These are people who lie and people who cheat. That is not the conservative way. Conservatives conserve things. We are respectful and we are constitutionally based. You know what the real problem is? People do not want to believe that people want to steal elections in this country. I've done extensive work over the years for voting monitoring overseas. If we had a variance in the exit polling of even 2% from what actually was tabulated, which is exactly how the Orange Revolution came about in Ukraine, we would be in there explaining to people something is wrong. We have had numerous elections in this country now in which where you use Diebold election system machines, what happens with the vote is way off, 5, 10, as much as 12% from the exit polling and the actual survey. These statistical numbers are impossible. And the problem is, Americans do not want to believe that we have people stealing our elections. And they must come to the realization there are people in this country who want to steal elections, and we must stop them.
Okay, up with the lights. Okay, how about some thoughts and comments?
How has you've started this in Kane County? You have, the law has been sent to Springfield. How have you
Oh, the
been?
bill.
The bill. Oh, no.
We hope the law.
Yeah, the bill. How have you been received?
Well, why don't we, if you could, turn to your appendix, and let's do a quick, we have a solution, ladies and gentlemen. We have a powerful single solution to a very complex election system integrity problem. Okay? You just think of all the different elements and components that are involved in our election processes, from the ballots to the memory cards, to the tabulators, to the judges, to the registration. I mean, this is a complex system, and much of it goes on in the dark of cyberspace. Now, the Illinois Election Integrity Act was first introduced by State Representative Mike Boland in 2007. We're looking for the single-page summary in your appendix. That's what and I was involved in helping to craft that legislation. I did not write the bill. That was written by Bob Wilson, who was an attorney, who did an amazing job in crafting the actual text of the legislation. It was introduced in 2007. Boland, he was introducing a public campaign finance act and the Election Integrity Act. So when he went to the well to introduce it, he said Mike Madigan gave him a Cheshire smile. Now, Mike Madigan reads every bill that every state representative is submitted, okay? And then based on whatever criteria he uses, he decides whether that bill is going to end up in the Rules Committee and go nowhere, or be referred to the appropriate committee for consideration. So what happened to the Illinois Election Integrity Act in 2007? Sent to the Rules Committee, and it stayed there for 2 years. Boland reintroduced it in 2009. What happened to the 2009 version? It was sent to the Rules Committee, and it stayed there for 2 years. Elizabeth Hernandez was the chief sponsor in 2011. It was introduced. Where did the Election Integrity Act go? To the Rules Committee. What happened to it? It sat there for 2 years. In 2013, Linda Chapalavia, my state representative, introduced the Illinois Election Integrity Act. What happened? It was sent to the Rules Committee, and it stayed there for 2 years. The same thing happened in 2015, and she reintroduced it in 2017. And finally, I guess there were some reps that were getting kind of angry that their bills never got out of the Rules Committee. So then the bill was sent to the Election and Campaign Finance Committee, where it was sat there for a little while, and then was promptly re-referred to the Rules Committee. Okay, now this legislation is going to be reintroduced in the House and the Senate. Currently, the Senate version is House Bill 834. It's an identical word-for-word companion piece of legislation, and then the House Bill 712. It's still active until we have the new assembly sworn in. So Senator Christina Castro of Elgin has told me that she will reintroduce the Senate version. Linda Chapa will reintroduce the House version. This will happen probably sometime in January. The new representatives get sworn in when? The 3rd of January. Then the committees are constituted, so that we're going to need to find out who's on the Rules Committee. It's about 5 or so reps, and then who's on the Election Campaign Finance Committee, because those are the folks that are going to have the earliest decisions on the fate of the legislation. Now, how much will these audits cost? Well, we estimate that for each election, it's about $2 million. The CPAs will be paid $75 for every precinct that they're auditing. So like in Kane County, we have 291 precincts, so they would get 291 times $75. Now, this is not this is kind of like a pro bono nonprofit rate. CPA firms do this. I know I work, they will charge nonprofits a lower rate than they will their, corporate clients. So anyway, so these audits we estimate will cost about $2 million in election. Now, the legislation is set up so that there is going to be an election integrity fund administered by the Illinois Board of Elections, and that fund will accept voluntary donations to fund the $2 million audit costs for the primary election and then the general election. Now, how much money was spent in 2018 by candidates on the elections? More than $1 million? The Green Party, when Jill Stein realized, she looked at the exit poll data in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and the exit polls clearly predicted that Hillary Clinton had won in those states, she went ahead because she was a candidate for president. She had the legal standing to petition for a recount. The Green Party in 1 week raised over $7 million to fund this very expensive process. They have to hire lawyers, and then the states really jacked up their recount fees to outrageous levels, to really discourage any kind of a recount. And so anyway, if they can do that in 1 week, raise $7 million, golly gee whiz, I think the state of Illinois can raise $4 million over a 2-year period, And when the law is passed, I'm going to write the first $100 check. Yeah, Drew.
Keep this in mind, and I know I told you this, but I don't think everybody in this room understands this. There's 102 counties in this state. In 2016, this county spent $2.6 million for our elections that year. Okay? Do the math, folks. $4 million for a year's worth of auditing.
2 years. Well, election cycle.
Elections, okay.
A 2-year election cycle, yeah.
Is a drop in a bucket. Any quality person and that's worked for any company can go back and show you, hey, you're talking about what? Less than 5% cost to ensure that your stuff is right?
Yeah. And the thing is that why? See, the election administrators have not been supportive of this legislation. The county, I talked to the former director of the Aurora Election Commission before it was closed down this year, and this individual told me that the administrators were told that the Election Integrity Act would require 100% hand count of all the ballots. No, 10%. So if you were a county clerk and someone came along with a piece of legislation that told you you're going to have to go hand count 100% of the paper ballots, you might say, well, I'm not going to get behind that legislation. But if you only have to randomly select 10% and you can have the judges do that in 60 to 90 minutes, that's a very different kettle of fish. Now, Spoonamore said that you could get away with maybe auditing just 2% of the ballots and have a high degree of confidence. This legislation requires 10%, This is a super scientific exit poll. Yes, ma'am.
The problem is, though, if the 10% does show variance, then you're going to have to go back to law and recount.
Well, what that does is it'll raise a red flag, code red, to the candidate. Now, that there's something amiss, and then they have the option to pursue the recount. Now, the problem is that recounts have a lot of problems with them. They're expensive. Campaigns are depleted. So we may need some supplemental legislation so that the poor candidate who is the victim of either error or fraud, the financial burden it falls on the election authority to find out where the mistake was made or where the error was. But so now the 3 audits. The first audit is the operational process audit done by independent CPAs weeks prior to the election. The second audit is a parallel tabulation of the poll tapes. Now in Kane County, we're attempting to execute a parallel tabulation of the poll tapes, but our county clerk has been not transparent, not cooperative, and that individual has made it difficult, because what we did is we tried to get closing poll watchers at all 120 polling places in Kane County for all 491 precincts. Plus, we wanted to get the poll tapes for the five early voting locations. So far, the supervisor of elections is telling us, well, the poll tapes from the early voting are sealed documents. Well, we're going to have to find. Personally, I think that's a bunch of hooey, but I'm going to have to consult.
It's hanging on the frickin' door.
Well, no, that's election night poll tapes, right? Yeah. So the thing is that I've been working with Weeks, Jerry and Steve came down, and so we've been laboriously taking the election night poll tapes and putting them into our Excel spreadsheet. Now, the second audit, the professional, licensed, independent CPAs would do is picture this. They're not. We had, we recruited 120 individuals to go through training to actually show up at the polling place at 6:45, okay? And we got 15 of our 16 townships completely covered with closing poll watchers. We had 2 polling places in Aurora Township, no, and the city of Aurora, we only had about 50% of our polling places covered. But the thing is that the way the legislation would work, Kane County has 2 tally points. The circuit clerk's office on Randall Road and Building B at the government center. Picture 3 or 4 auditors at each of those centers. The judges, when they bring in their mobile ballot boxes with the memory cards with the votes, are bringing in an extra copy of the poll tapes for the CPAs, okay? So they don't have to go out to the polling places, all 120. The polling tapes come to them by the judges, and within 48 hours, they will be required to have a completed tabulated central parallel tabulation of the votes within 48 hours. Then we'll have to deal with the someone's trying to hack my vocal cords. So anyway, so instead of weeks of volunteers trying to do this, we have weeks and weeks of preparation. The professional CPAs will have the spreadsheets all, and they'll knock it off in 48 hours. And so between the 10% random count by the judges and the parallel tabulation, candidates will know in a timely way whether they need the request to recount. Because right now, we're not going to get finished with our tabulation till after the first of the year. Well, the opportunity for recounts is long come and gone. But that horse is out of the barn. Okay, so we're going to see if it's even possible for a group, an independent group, to be poll watchers and do a parallel tabulation. We don't know if we're going to be able to actually pull that off.
I'm pretty sure I understand the process that you're describing here. You're talking about a 10% recount, or 10%
hand count of the ballots
at each precinct.
At each polling place, that's right, for each precinct, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there's going to be a secondary level.
A parallel tabulation of the poll tapes, which is the totals for each precinct.
At the central, the county central.
Well, so how do we know, like for our county sheriff, voters cast ballots in 291 precincts? How do those votes all get added up? Well, in each we have e-slates, and we have like 6 DREs, and they're controlled by the judge's booth controller, and the votes go to the judge's booth controller, and then there's this mobile ballot box unit that they pull out, and the judges bring it to one of the 2 tally centers, and then the memory card is taken out and put into a tabulating computer, and then all the votes are added up around the county, so we know who the winner was of the sheriff's race, the county clerk's race, etc. And then for the congressional districts, the county board, We had 86 different candidates on the ballot in Kane County. So more than 86, so close to 100.
So you could highlight at the precinct level which that particular precinct is off on its tally.
You can't. It's only statistically valid for the entire election district. Okay, for the entire county board district, for the county congressional district in that part of the county, for the entire county. You have to add up the sample count sheets across the entire county. So let's think about county sheriff, county clerk, treasurer. Let's think about those races, easiest to understand.
So 10% of the precinct's vote doesn't give you.
It doesn't give you. You can't make a valid statistical inference about all the 290 other precincts.
No, I'm not saying that.
Or even about that single precinct.
But-
You'd have to hand count, all of the paper ballots in that precinct, and then you'd know if the computer was generating a correct total. Right, if the poll tape totals were correct, the only way you know that for sure is to hand count all of those ballots in the polling place on election night in a single precinct. But the power of statistical sampling allows us to only randomly select 10% of the ballots in all of the 291 precincts, do a sample count, a hand count, and then add those count sheets all together.
Okay. I mean, it can't be used to say.
You
something
can't
fraudulent
draw a
before you-
conclusion about a single precinct.
You can't, okay.
No.
I was trying to understand if that's
Yeah.
possible.
Right. So the thing is that when does the action take place in Springfield? Well, this is going to be the first year of the 2-year session. The bills are going to be introduced in January and February. As citizens, we have to move on this now. We have to be ready with our media messages, our messages to our legislators. We want every voter in the state to contact their state representative and their state senator saying, we absolutely need to have election integrity. We need to have an audit, valid audits, as Stephen Spoonamore, cybersecurity expert. The only way we're going to have security, guys, is what? Hand-counted paper ballots and audits, right? Audits of the paper. So why should we as citizens not go forward and be an example to the rest of the country and have these 3 mandated election audits, and then we will know with great confidence whether the vote totals are accurate or whether there's something wrong and we need a recount. Yes,
Do you
sir?
have a website where we can get e-cards or cards to fill in and to print and fill to send our representatives?
Yeah, we do. The ballot, Melissa has some, if you want to see me afterwards and give me your contact information, the Ballot Integrity Project has printed up cards for both state rep and state senator that we passed out at events. But we didn't do that now because the bill numbers are going to change. And there are going to be 51 new senators and representatives.
Right now, this volunteer right here is helping get all our contact information for our state reps. As soon as we get the committee names, she'll be helping us get that information.
On your Facebook, you have the names.
That volunteer over there is already. We already have a Facebook page in draft mode. We haven't published it yet, so waiting until we get approval to be a chapter.
Which should come very quickly because there are only 3 board members currently, and I know all of them.
So basically, how we need to help these guys is, first of all, inside your packets, there's a little membership thing for the state. After going through their bylaws, we need 3 state members in good standing to request to the state group that we form our chapter.
Which requires a $25
A yearly.
Membership fee.
And I don't know if any of you, I belong to the Marine Corps League. It's $40 a year for them. Anna, the League of Women Voters, is there a fee for them?
$70.
And then half of the membership fee is returned to the local chapter. So it'll be $12.50.
Basically, my plan is, they say we can get away with 3, but we need 4 executive board members. They want to put the secretary and the treasurer together. My experience in 15 years I've been in politics, I don't want anybody doing that. That's way too much work for one person, and I want to keep that person as a friend. So ask them to be the secretary and the treasurer, I'm going to lose a friend. So we need at least 4 people in this county to be executive board members. If you notice in the thing, they have 5 committees. We need chairs for each one of those committees. Some people we've already asked to try to be that. We have plenty of openings. But we also added, what I would like to do once we're approved is add a 6-1 fundraising, because these handouts, these meeting rooms, these kind of things, the mailings we're going to end up having to do, the postcard parties, they all cost money. So we're going to need to raise money for these kind of things. So basically, anybody that's interested in becoming a state member, please fill out that form. Let me know so I can get a head count, so we can get the process rolling for getting us our charter going. As soon as we get the committee assignments, I will pass that information on, and we will get the contact information. I'm working with Larry to give you guys some sort of mock-up scripts for phone calls, emails, letters to the editor, those kind of things. So the next time we meet, I should have these drafts ready for you guys. We'll have our list of people we need to contact, and we can start pushing this and getting on our representatives' behind. I know every one of you in here put a lot of work in getting people elected. Whether your candidates got elected or not, now it's time to make whoever did win do their job. And it's going to take us reminding them what their job is. And this is all stuff you guys could do on your own time, from home. It's not like you have to go somewhere and do something.
The best thing, one of the best things you could do is once the bill is introduced, is just to get in touch with your state representative and your state senator and send them a letter, make a phone call, or see if you can arrange a visit. Now, the ballot integrity is creating a legislative task force, and we're trying to start 5 specialized working groups, which is in your handout: a media and public relations group, a political contacts group, a public education group, a technology group, and election research. Now, this is across the whole state, okay? So the people, if you're interested in media and public relations, you can be helping not only McHenry County, but you can be working, around the state, political contacts. So the definitions and the job descriptions of these committees are in your appendix, okay? So a little description of their duties. Now, before you go, I want to highly recommend, and plus I want to give Drew his own personal copy. Jonathan Simon is an amazing guy who in 2004 was able to capture the unadjusted media exit polls in 48 states when it was Bush versus Kerry, okay? And I have the exit poll vote differential tables, and because of that, we were able to discover that indeed the exit polls predicted that Kerry won Ohio, he won Nevada, he won New Mexico, he won Iowa, and those states would have given him the presidency. So by our count, there have been 3 fraudulent presidential elections: 2000, 2004, and 2016. Okay. Now, John has been. I have the 2012 edition, the 2014 edition, the 2016 edition, and they just came out with the 2018 edition. It's $21.95, and I contacted your bookstore on Woodstock. Read Between the Lines. She'll order it for you. It's the same price as the online price. If you can't make it to the bookstore, you can order it online. But I really recommend that you get this, because the things that Stephen Spoonemore was talking about and the Princeton Hack guys, he's done a magnificent job documenting, and he has a timeline going back to 2000 at the end of the book, which he calls, it's called A Timeline of Events and Anomalies in the Computerized Voting Era, 2000 to 2018. It's about 15 pages, and I recommend that you start with the timeline, because it gives you an overview of what's been going on with computerized election theft, that the media has not been reporting, the victims, the candidate victims have not pursued it. There's tremendous pressure on the apparent losers to concede. John Kerry collected $15 million in a fund to challenge for election challenge if he thought that there were improprieties going on in the 2004 election. When did Kerry concede? The next morning, when half of the Ohio votes hadn't even been counted. Okay, not 1 penny of that election integrity fund was ever spent on election integrity. And then there have been So there was an attempted recount in 2004 for the presidential election. Ballots were stolen, the recount was sabotaged, people went to jail. The recount requested by the Green and Libertarian candidate, not Kerry, he didn't request a recount. It was totally thwarted by the forces in Ohio. So where there should have been an accurate, honest recount, it was totally scuttled the way it was in Wisconsin, the way it was in Pennsylvania this year, and the way it was in Michigan. I mean, the courts shut down the recount process. And Jill Stein, she wasn't doing this because she hoped she'd be president. There was no chance. She was doing it because she looked at the exit poll numbers in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, and they said that Hillary had won. Clearly, okay? So, and if Hillary had been given those 3 states, Trump wouldn't be in the White House. But, and his total margin in those states was 77,000 votes, which was a teeny fraction percent of the voters in those 3 states. That's what you can do with some specialized computerized election theft. So I have the tables you can look at, but please buy this book as a resource because it is fantastic. He's a great writer, and boy, he has it's all here, guys. This is the record. This is the record. So anyway, so Drew, anyway, here is your copy, and read it. Read on.
We have to be knighted.
We want to. And thank you guys for coming out and missing. How did the Bears do?
They won.
Whoa!
24-14.